Hi everyone, welcome back to this last episode of the semester of the 5710 podcast, this time with a very special guest all the way from Canada, and Brian Mackay-Lyons. Brian established his own practice in 1985 before partnering with Talbot's Sweetapple in 2005. The practice has built an international reputation for design excellence confirmed by over 125 awards, most notably the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada Gold Medal in 2015. The work of the practice has also been recognised in over 330 publications, including 6 monographs. Whilst the body of work of Mackay-Lyons Sweetapple Architects is known for its cultural responsiveness to local landscapes, climate and material culture, it also consistently possesses an archetypal quality which touches a global audience. So welcome to Scotland. You've been here a few times before, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of times, yeah.
And you've had quite a busy day today running a workshop in the university.
Yes, that's right.
How did that go?
Good.
How did you find the students? Are they similar to Canadian students?
Early to say. It seems to be a good atmosphere in the school, though.
Yeah.
There's a trusting atmosphere, which goes a long way.
We all get on. I think it's the open studios. We kind of working together.
And I think culturally, where I come from in New Scotland, not such a different culture.
Yeah.
You know, the values, the sense of humor are not so different.
It's kind of a northern culture, which is something that we celebrate in the school.
Kind of Celtic culture.
Yeah. So when I was doing some research, I found a piece on your website saying that you believe architecture and agriculture are strongly linked. Could you maybe explain to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, we know historically that sedentary societies, communities developed with agriculture.
Yeah.
So building and agriculture, kind of permanent building and agriculture came at the same time. And I also think of, all too often, buildings are seen as consuming the landscape.
Yeah.
And I think of buildings as a cultivating influence, ideally, that you should leave the landscape better than you found it by building, ironically. So I see architecture as a cultivating influence. So, and I guess I find rural industrial architecture great precedent for what we do all over, all over the world. I've always been interested in what poor people make, what ordinary folks do, which is, again, that kind of Celtic view of the world, right? That democratic view. So, so I look often to agrarian buildings for a kind of rural industrial precedent for what we make.
And you also tutor at the Dalhousie University.
Yeah.
How does that kind of affect how you practice? Do you take anything across?
Sure. And I do a lot of teaching, frankly, that I don't, more than I admit, usually. I've done about 20 endowed chairs around the world, so you end up traveling and meeting interesting people through teaching. But also, I think the main advantage to your practice in being a teacher is that teaching forces you to take the anecdotal, messy circumstances from practice and turn it into principles, objectify it, and turn it into principles that you can then explain to other people. So it forces you to be clear. And it's also a good workout. If you have to do 10 desk quits in a day, it's a workout intellectually, because you have to get inside someone else's head.
Yeah.
And in terms of rules of engagement, you have to talking about what they're interested in talking about, then disengage and do it again.
Yeah.
So it's a great workout. And helping people find a form-giving strategy for themselves. It gives you lots of practice at conceptual design when you teach.
Yeah. Maybe similarly, you were the founder of the highly publicized and widely acclaimed Ghost workshops. Would you ever kind of set up a real culture of collaboration and have some big names involved, such as Kenneth Frampton and Glenn Merker? Would you like to explore that again in the future, or maybe see other people kind of pick that idea up?
Well, certainly other people have picked it up. I mean, it's influenced a whole other generation of design build programs around the world, and that's good. It takes an incredible amount of energy. And so yeah, I'd have to think pretty hard about doing it again. Yeah. It's very expensive. And as Juhani Palasma said at one of the ghosts, he said, I think you should stop now because it is very expensive, and the best part of it is the most expensive part of it, which is the energy, the hospitality of your family that your family brings to it. So it was intense and cost money, and we left with half-built buildings that we had to figure out what to do with, and so I miss it. We still do these design build workshops once in a while. My partner Talbot Sweetapple does these design build workshops now. So we're still at it. Yeah. And we might restart it. But we ended it a number of years ago with a real party, a real great event at our farm, with 30 of the top architects and from around the world and historians and stuff and speakers. And as Kenneth Frampton said, you could never repeat it.
Yeah.
You do that
like
once.
A once in a lifetime thing.
You do that once. Yeah.
And then kind of from that you started up the Ghost Residency where you invite an intern.
That's right.
Each year. How does this affect how you practice? Because do you have to kind of get to know a new person each year and then you work very closely with them?
Yeah. Well, the ghost intern lives at our farm.
Yeah.
And so they have to do some farm work.
Yeah, I was reading up about it.
But also, it's where I work on special projects. Mm. So if it gives someone a chance, it gives me support in my satellite office at the farm, and it gives an opportunity for someone to work really closely, more closely than you can in an office, a normal office. It's also a good way to get to know people that you might like to hire. Yeah. One of the ghost interns now will work in our Denver office in a month. So it's a great way to check one another out. Yeah,
it's kind of like a bedding in process where you get to make sure that you're compatible in a way.
Yeah. So nothing like living with someone to find that out.
So when you're looking for resident interns, what sort of person are you looking for? Maybe both portfolio wise, but also personality wise.
Well, someone you want to live with. Someone's got a good work ethic. One thing they find out is how hard I work, and maybe they decide after that that's too much. But so someone who has a good work ethic and likes the kind of remote thing, and wants to do some of that agricultural work, which is not a big part of it. But we just had lambing at the farm this past week, and it's great. It's so much fun, And so, someone who's game for all of that. Obviously, formal skill is the first thing you look for in people's portfolio. Drawing skills, and an interest in how things are made. Our work is really more and more. That's what happens. The older you get, the more you care about how to make things. The more you know about how to make things, and so one looks for that instinct. The making instinct, which is getting rare actually in our intranet era we live in. Yeah,
it's very visual based nowadays. So we spoke about how you're from a northern climate and we're from a northern climate, and there's maybe a cross-pollination of ideas there. Would you ever consider designing a building in Scotland?
Oh yeah, we work internationally quite a bit. Yeah. And Glenn Murcutt is a good friend, close friend, and he said he will never ever work outside of Australia. So he's much more disciplined than I am, and I respect him immensely. I just find traveling and understanding different cultures really, really interesting. And you learn how to look at culture at home. You learn your manners at home at the dinner table, right? And then you take it out into the world with you. So you never really know as much about the place as a local person. Yeah. And that's the drawback in a way. But yeah, another mentor of mine was Charles Moore, who I worked for, and he was the consummate traveler. He loved traveling, and he had a photographic memory, and he had a giant library of strategies in it, design strategies in his head all the time, because he understood how different cultures operate. Mm-hmm. So I find that interesting. You know, we're in the culture business as architects, so traveling and working in different places you got to be respectful. You have to be a good guest when you work. I don't believe in the kind of architects who drop the buildings out of airplanes. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to make a real attempt as a guest in a culture, in a country, to understand and respect their culture. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, in a way, that maybe another one of those things that links us, you know, in Britain and in Canada. You know, we're good guests. We're respectful people. Yeah. You know, we're not arrogant. We have some modesty culturally, I think, which is really important. Mm-hmm. I find that as a common thing between us.
Some more common ground. Usually I save this question for last, but since we're speaking about travelling, a student of architecture might go on a grand tour around the world to cities or buildings. If you could recommend a city and a building that they could visit or make a stop on their tour, what would they be?
Oh man, that's hard. Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I was last week teaching at Yale, so I visited, made a pilgrimage to the Yale Center for British Art by Louis Kahn, which is amazing. And, you know, every modern architect must go to see the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe. Probably one of my very favorite buildings in the world is in Cordoba in Spain, the Great Mosque, Great Mosque in Cordoba, which is so amazing, right? So I think it's important for architects to travel and to take in as much as they can. And ironically, the ones that travel the most are the ones that are from small centers, because they are more outward looking.
Yeah, because they have to kind of travel to see it anyway.
Yeah, and you become less complacent that way. You know. So yeah, I when I travel, I always make sure I do two things. One is to see the masterworks, and because I think they have a kind of timeless quality. And I always make sure that I spend most of my time looking at the vernacular. You know, I would say almost all of the principles of environmental sustainability, for instance, in architecture come from vernacular building traditions. You know, the vernacular is what you do and you can't afford to get it wrong. And I also, I guess as a democratically minded person, believe that all culture derives from the poor. I don't believe in the trickle-down theory of culture. I think culture comes out of the ground. So, you know, a number of years ago, a bunch of us went to the Dogon in North Africa, in the Sahara Desert, and lived for a while in those mud cities, those amazing mud cities. And, you know, just made out of one material and absolutely sparse. Sahara Desert, no water, no materials, you know, just mud. So I always, you know, from here I'm going to the Orkney Islands because I want to see that Neolithic architecture. Speaking of timeless. And so, yeah, travel always, and don't forget the ordinary stuff, because the best places, the best environments, the best cities are amazing aggregations of modest things.
Do you have a city that might best exemplify that in your head?
Well, I always made the distinction between Florence and Siena, because Florence is full of masterworks, and Siena isn't, but it's a better city.
Interestingly, you're not the first person to say that on this podcast.
Oh wow! All right, that makes me feel better.
So final question, and then we'll wrap up. What's your favourite memory from your architectural career, whether from university or in the workplace? This is something we ask everybody as well.
Boy, that's a hard one. I'm not sure I can answer that. I guess one kind of systemic answer would be the form-finding exercise, the moment when a scheme for a project becomes apparent. You know, it comes out of a blank sheet of paper. You know, that is the most, you know, lovely thing. You know, the blank sheet of paper, and trying to make a clear strategy, find a clear strategy that has legs, that has, so the partie, the making of the partie for me, the fewest lines that tell you the most about, give you a roadmap for the development of the whole project, down to the doorknobs. So that is a kind of a, the other one is, I think I practice architecture because of architecture is a social art. And so the rewarding thing about working with other people and feeding off of their ideas, their energy, which I learned from Charles Moore and Giancarlo De Carlo, who invented participatory design, but feeding off those ideas and getting outside of your own limitations of your own head. So, and it extends to builders and tradespeople. We love tradespeople. We love working with tradespeople. And we learn a lot from them. And we really enjoy working with them. And in response, they love us back, and they'll go to hell and back for us. So that interpersonal thing, the ability to feed off of the ideas of others.
Instead of just being inside your own boxes. Well, thank you so much for joining us, coming all the way from Canada.
All right.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Scotland and your trip to Orkney. When do you go to Orkney?
On Sunday evening on the ferry.
Okay. How long are you staying there?
4 days over there.
Okay, so you'll get a good amount of days to kind of explore the islands. That'll be good.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
You'll need to take some photos and send them back to the university.
I'm going to see a lot of Orkney work tomorrow at the crit, right? The big crit.
Yeah, enjoy that as well. It's usually a very good event. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in. This is probably my last episode of the 510 podcast, so thank you all for listening. Goodbye.